Welcome to Feminine Power Time, where wisdom, leadership, and well-being meet. And welcome to episode 9 of 9 in this special season 8.5, the Season of Light. I'm Jennifer Alexander, co-curator and guest host for this season, which has run in June, July, and August. But whenever you're listening, trust that you're receiving this in the perfect season for you. If you're new here to Feminine Power Time, welcome. We're so glad that you found us. And if you're a longtime listener, thank you for coming back week after week to be in this conversation with us. It's been such an honor to be here with you all and with Christine during this season of light, as we're in this real-time live experiment of the feminine practices of co-creation and grafting in order to hold space here on the podcast for us to gather during this season of light, to stay light together. And just a quick reminder, what is staying light? Well, it means to stay centered, calm, and clear, to be radiant, resilient, and rooted, even in the midst of the swirl of the outside world. It is not about spiritual bypassing, but instead, it's a way of living and utilizing our practices in order to come back to our light, even when we get wobbly. And trust me, we all get the wobbles. We're human beings, and we're having a human experience, and it is not about being perfect or maintaining some high level of vibrational consciousness 24/7. No, it's about being human, having emotions, having thoughts, and seeing them in order to transform them and elevate from wherever we are so that we can show up differently as leaders in our own lives, in how we use our voices, our choices, and our presence in responding to life as it unfolds. In our conversation today, we're imagining a world in which we all align our work with our well-being. Just imagine if our culture embraced that all humans are designed differently, and that means that we all need different things to support our well-being, body, mind, heart, and spirit. Now imagine if you and I actually knew ourselves and our designs well enough so that we could choose to align our work with our well-being. Well, the good news is this is possible. And in today's episode, Christine is going to guide us through an exploration of 3 realms to illuminate the way in which we're designed to work best, which will allow us to liberate ourselves from what doesn't align and begin to take small yet significant steps to bring our reality into alignment with our design. This is such a beautiful capstone to our focus on catalyzing and co-creating during the month of August. And it's going to set us up for this next season as well. And we'll give you a preview of what's to come on Feminine Power Time in a bit. But for now, I invite you to press pause on the outside world, take a deep breath, and join us for this powerful conversation. Here's Christine.
Welcome to Feminine Power Time. My name is Christine Arilo, and I am your host, and I welcome you to join us here in this place that we gather to bring wisdom, well-being, and leadership together. And when I say leadership, I mean personal leadership, which is where all great things start in our lives. And today specifically, we are going to dive into aligning your work and your work in the world and how it shows up every day and also in big ways with your well-being. So just take that in for a second. What would it look like if I aligned how I work, the way I work, what I consider work with my well-being? And when I say well-being, I mean body, physical, energetic, mind, your mental state, your mental calm and clarity, heart, emotion, that sense of security and feeling loved and like you're in the right place, and joy and fulfillment and open-heartedness, your spirit, that radiance, that passion, that purpose, all 4 of these realms of well-being. And you can add on to that all of the other parts on the material, energetic, spiritual, soul level plane as well. So today what we're going to do is we're going to dive into, I keep saying dive. Why do you think I keep saying dive? I'm like, maybe because the water, what we do here at Feminine Power Time, for those of you that are new, for those of you that have been around a while, you'll know this, is that we are looking through all of these different things in the world that we explore through the feminine, which is the water. And it isn't that the masculine isn't invited or isn't part of it, but we know that in this current world that we sometimes like to call the banana world, that's also referred to as the overculture or the mainstream world, so much of it has been over-focused on the masculine, the fire, the yang, the grow, the push, the more, the few over many, a very dominant-based culture. And so we could try to fight that. We could try to, take our Joan of Arc swords and go straight at it, and we will exhaust ourselves. So we are using a much higher level of energy, which is why we call this reimagine and redesign. So the wisdom teaching is really clear, is that what you focus on is what grows. So if we're always focusing on what's not working, more of that's just going to continue. Now, it isn't like you want to spiritually, mentally, emotionally bypass what's not working. That's part of how this culture has gotten to where it is right now, because so many people, we don't really understand the power, love, that you have, because we don't really understand power, because we don't really understand ourselves, because that's part of how the dominant culture has stayed in place for thousands and thousands and thousands of years by insinuating and telling us the answers are out there, and that the power should be given to someone else to tell us what to do or what we can't do. And there's been plenty of rebellions and plenty of, rageful things that have happened that have risen up to say, actually, this isn't okay with me. And we need to do that 100%. But if we're not rooted in the feminine, which is this like earth and this water, it just adds to the fire. It adds to the frenzy. And I feel like we are at an apex point that I feel like we've been waiting for. Some people say 2,000 years. I'm going to go with 2,000 years. It might be more like 1,700, but for like a really long time. So, one of the things we do here is we look at time totally different. Is Einstein, dear friend of mine, well, not on the physical plane. I didn't know him personally, but appreciate his willingness to, speak truth to the establishment in many ways, was that time it's a man-made construct. And its only value is to basically get us to the same place at the same time, so we know. But otherwise, it's not the only reality in town. So I love opening up. That's my role. That's our role here, to gather together for these sessions that come in the form of a podcast that we call Feminine Power Time, to explore this starting with ourselves. Right? So the way that we have been working, the way that this whole crazy overculture works, hasn't been working for a long time. We know that, right? So how do we break that down into the place of self-leadership and personal leadership to find where our power is, to be the co-creators of what else is possible here? And that's what I do. That's what we do here. And so I hope that you can always take these sessions when we come together in the series that we do here. It's kind of like, my role is to be a wisdom teacher, to be a person who, kind of expands our thinking and is really a stand for transformation into the new era. So what we're going to do today in this series, and focusing really, like what I'm saying to you all, is like, okay, if we put life at the center of everything, and life including what includes your well-being, how would you reimagine work and the way you work? And what can you start to make some small shifts in that will lead to bigger shifts? Another lovely man that I just adore is Michael Franti. So I've got Einstein, I've got Michael Franti. He's a singer, a songwriter, activist, definite co-creator. For those of you who don't know him, check him out. And I love one of his songs is Think Big, Start Small. So one of the things I've noticed in the 20 years that I've been working with people as teacher, thinker, transformational agent, and advisor is that we butt up against, like, okay, we can believe in the bigger vision, we can believe in the possibility even maybe, but then we short circuit because we're like, I can't change that. How's that ever going to change? Well, change happens in nature, just like it happens for us because we're part of nature. So I'm looking outside at Magnolia, my tree, in the back of my yard, she just didn't start out like this full-grown tree that blooms every year. She started out as, a seed or whatever it is. I'm assuming, I don't know for sure that it's a seed, but you know what I mean. However, all trees come from like that seed, that mustard seed, that has all of the pieces in it. So you're the same, love. You were started as a seed, and all of the things that hold you for who you are, your design, that is the portal to what this next phase of your own evolution, elevation, and co-creation is. And we're working in right now a longer, bigger 20-year arc. And inside of that is a smaller 3-year time cycle. So that is even like thinking big, like the bigger vision of like when I think of aligning to your design, part of it is your leadership and what's the impact you want to make in the world. And know that that's going to, that tree probably took at least 20 years to grow into a place where it could continually bloom. You have things within yourself that are like that. But if we just focus on the big out there, we'll be like, oh my God, we're short-circuiting. We're short-circuiting. So we got to pull it back, to these like next 3 years. So when I'm doing coaching and leadership mentoring in the Align Your Design consultations and mentoring that I do, we're always looking at both that 20-year cycle and that 3-year cycle. And that's what I'm inviting us into today and in this series. And specifically, like, let's not wait for someone to come around and ask you some of these inquiries that I'm going to put forward today and some of these ways of thinking. Let's say, you know what? I have the power within me, just like Dorothy did. And Glenda the Good Witch said, like, honey, you've had the power within you all along. And let's think big and start small. What do you think? You good? You in for that? All right, let me take a sip out of my mug. Speaking of which, I'm drinking out of my first mug that I've made in pottery. It weighs about 5 pounds, you all. It's pretty heavy, but it looks awesome. And on the bottom, it says elevate, enjoy. And I'm hoping that, over time, my mugs won't, be something that could be like a dangerous weapon that could, kill someone if you knocked them too hard on the head with it. But it's a beautiful mug, and I have this vision for this series of mugs I want to make that have they're called the Fierce Grace mugs, and they have the polarities on the mugs where like one side might say fierce and the other side said grace, or one side says stillness and the other side says swiftness. So they're mugs that bring together the paradox, take polarity into paradox. I want to make some of these. Now, I didn't start there. That's my big vision, because my bigger vision, my 20-year part is in part, and we'll get into this in the next series, part of my Dharma is integrating the masculine and the feminine to create integrated models and ways of living that come from the place of wholeness within. And that was true even in the work of self-love that I brought in, because you can't have integration and wholeness within yourself and in the world without self-love, right? So see how all of this is tied together, because I do know my Dharma. But before I got to the Dharma part, I had to get to this part that we're going to share today. And so we're going to go into this inquiry again, is what happens when you align your work with your well-being. And of course, I love alliteration here. So we're really looking at the way you work best. And so we're going to look at rhythm, role, and radiance are the 3 pieces that we're going to look at today. And so I'm going to share some wisdom on it, as we always do, some perspective and some inquiries as we go along. So just take a breath here with yourself, wherever you're at, and just taking a moment to presence this word of well-being and what that really means to you. And taking a moment to imagine your world, which is the world and the ecosystem that you live and breathe in. Imagining one that was designed, created, and maintained to really support your well-being. And that's well-being mind, body, heart, spirit. And just take an exhale. See if you can just really take a moment to expand your mind, expand and let go of all of the reasons why that might not be true today, to say, why wouldn't that be true? Right? I mean, I'm looking outside, it's raining, it's green right now. This earth naturally evolves and maintains itself to really support the well-being of the whole. So if you're a micro unit of the earth, which you are, we are as humans, like your system, your body, your being, your brain, then if you're naturally supporting its well-being, body, mind, heart, and spirit, you're going to stay in harmony. And that doesn't mean that you'll never have challenges. It doesn't mean that, sometimes crappy stuff is going to happen. It means at the core of who you are, you're going to feel that connection, that well-being, which, remember, the word wealth, root of the word wealth, means well-being. So I dedicate this exploration, conversation, and invitation to elevation to you, to all of us, coming more into align with our design by actually putting our well-being first and giving yourself permission to both explore it, but also be honest with yourself. People, when I started the self-love work and really went deep into self-love, which I believe is primary to leadership. Part of the reason we have this banana world is because the people who are in leadership positions, who have been given power and authority, are not operating from self-love and wholeness. They are oozing with wounds that are then creating more wounds on the planet. And that happens also in parenting, why it gets passed down. Our parents did their best, but they were full of their own wounds and not really given the tools that they needed to be able to come back to wholeness. I mean, I always joke, my parents had Donahue, he did his best. And Oprah was better, and more and more is happening. So we're evolving as a culture, but just to take a moment and really dedicate this, like, what? Yeah, I have this co-creative power. So let's start with the way you work best by looking at your rhythm. So here's what I want you to think about rhythm. Rhythm is like when it's different than routine. For those of you who have the Overwhelmed and Over It book, I'm gonna go back. I'm gonna reference this while we're talking. For those of you who don't have the Overwhelmed and Over It book, do get it, because we do work with it here all of the time, and it has visuals and pictures in it that help make all of this a lot more alive. You'll notice in the section on time within this is that, we think we want routine. And it isn't routine that most of us actually want. What we want is a rhythm. Routine is like dot, 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 dot. Like that is the current way that many work environments and how the work environment world got created. I mean, if you look back to the most recent way of how we work and how work is designed and how we think about work, it's based on the Industrial Revolution consciousness. And before that, on the feudal consciousness. And before that, on the dominant over, a few have the power and access to the divine or to the money, and everyone else has to look to them. So this is how we end up here. And so in the Industrial Revolution, it's all about making more stuff and then, creating more things and more cars and more trains and more this. It's very manufacturing based. So the education system that got created to basically be able to mint out workers or mint out people who would be in managerial roles to make sure the minions did the work. And then there were, the people up on top, the few that would reap all of the money, the barons, the entrepreneurs, the kings, all of that. That's what we're still living in, and is crumbling day by day, and also people are grabbing and holding on to. So you have to know that we're in that system. And so if you think about like how the modern work world has worked, and was just I thought maybe it was never, what's going to have to change in order for us to break free of this? Because I broke free of it, many parts of it, in 2006 when I left being a employee, and we'll talk more about this, because I just couldn't do the 5-day a week, have to sit in your desk from 9:30 or from 8:30 to 5:30 every day, same thing, routine. And so just considering like what you actually want and the way the natural world works is rhythm. And in a rhythm, think of it like a symphony, like an orchestra, like a drum circle. Like there's ups and there's downs and there's intensity and there's lyricalness and there's melody and there's flow. And so in that variety, there's breathing, and it's much more like my hands are moving, like almost like I'm dancing. Like what if our work was more like a dance than a ... tick tock robot, and the gift of 2020 and the global pandemic. I mean, not that we would ever wish that on somebody, but this is how we are as humans. It's the structures were so in there, and even in our own consciousness, and that we couldn't break free. And so 2020 began what I call the great wake up and shake up. And it just started shaking everybody's systems, nervous systems, mental systems, fear systems that have kept people, humans, really in almost kind of like a indentured servitude model, where we didn't even realize I've had the power all along. We're Dorothy trapped in Oz thinking we need the wizard to get out, versus realizing that we have that within us. And so my inquiry for you is what is the rhythm that you best work within? It might be you love the TikTok Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, get up, start at 8, keep going until it's 5 o'clock, and then eat some dinner and then go back to work, TikTok robot. Maybe you like that. And if you do, more power to you. It's your design. But most of us aren't designed that way. And so let me just break down rhythm. We talked a little bit about this in the Cyclical Living podcast. If you missed that, go back and listen to it. Is that when you're thinking of rhythm is created in your life on these levels. You have a daily rhythm. You have a weekly rhythm. You have a monthly or a moonly rhythm, because the moon is a real thing and months are just the time calendar created by Julius Caesar and Pope Gregory. So moonly. And then you have a yearly rhythm that works on the quarterly and cross-quarter rhythm pattern, because that's how the earth naturally works, which we've talked a lot about with Schumann resonance and the earth and all of that. Today, I want to focus on week, because it's one of those things that I see that when you don't think about how the rhythm of your week, it's where a lot of your power is to create a rhythm for how you're working that supports your well-being, no matter what your situation is and how you work. And I'm not saying it's easier in some professions, in some realities it's harder, but if you start with this inquiry, it's going to start giving you information. And for some of you, you'll be able to make shifts right away. And for others of you, it may take you a little bit longer, but at least we've gotten started. So for those of you who have the Overwhelmed and Overbooked, you're going to want to look at page 265 and the Daring Act of Liberation that says, reset your weekly rhythm, create focused space and a fluid pace. So when you think about your week, everybody, and thinking about how you work best, so this is your design, right? So your body, mind, heart, and spirit, how your system is designed. What is the rhythm of the week that works best for you? And when you think about the week, the first step is actually to change the shape of your week. So instead of thinking of the week like a line, a linear line, and a calendar, I invite you to think of it more like looks like a rainbow or a half of circle, where you have Sunday at the start, and it goes up to Monday and Tuesday, and then it apexes right between Tuesday night to Wednesday morning, and then coming down you have Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. So this is similar for all day, week, month, and year. There's an upshift, an apex, and a downshift. So notice that this is why people call Wednesday hump day. And take that out of your vocabulary ASAP. So one of the things from a rhythm perspective is how humans tend to work best is not just waking up on Monday morning and just driving and starting and like off to the races. So like what's the best rhythm for how you start Monday? And then how does that impact how you spend Sunday? For me, for example, I work best when I have a slow start Monday. So slow start Monday means I don't schedule any meetings with anyone else before noon. And I have a meeting with my team, aka Noah, in the morning at 10:30. And we sit down and we set out the focus for our week, and we work through some of our things. And that's how that's an example of me like saying, okay, like what's that Monday? Like what's the best for me on a Sunday evening, and how I'm setting myself up so that Monday doesn't feel like I have to hit a wall. Now, some of you might be like, well, I have to be at work at 9:00 or I have to log in for a meeting at whatever. Partly what I want to just encourage all of you to like really start to look at what you can influence and what you can't influence. Because there's sometimes we have more influence than we think. And I talk to a lot of people that I'll, work with that are working within as employees within systems. And they're like, oh yeah, I have a 9:00 meeting every Monday. And so when we talk about how they might have some influence over making some suggestions of moving that, or, gathering with some of the other people and making some suggestions to the people who actually are making that decision. Because of the great wake up and shake up, we have more power than we think. And it's only sometimes we can feel like, oh, well, we don't have a lot of power because I'm only one person, or I have to get my kids to school. And maybe you do have to get your kids to school, but then can you come home on a Monday and actually give yourself a 15-minute, 20-minute walk, or something that allows you to just really deeply connect with yourself and set yourself up for the week. So it's going to look different for all of us because our realities are different and our designs are different. But I have found to be true that Monday is that slow start and really making sure that you're connected body, mind, heart, and spirit, and doing what you can to not have to just jump into it, to actually ease into it. So even if it's a Monday meeting, how it gets done can be different. So we could talk a lot more about Mondays, but I'm just going to, kind of have you feel that then as you go into Tuesdays, now here's the other part of a weekly rhythm. What are you doing in the middle of the week? So the middle of the week, if it's really about your well-being, needs a spacer. Somewhere in that Tuesday night, Wednesday morning, Wednesday evening space, some kind of spacer. Take a breath so that you can take a breath. This is part of how we put well-being like at the center of work. If we did, we would have breaths, not 10 minutes in between meetings. Like really like you're changing the structure. So how could you change the structure of your Wednesday mornings or your Wednesday afternoons to put breath in there? I'll give you a very specific example with a woman that I work with, who's a mom and works full-time as an employee. She can work from home 2 days a week, I think. So Wednesdays are her creative days. And so she doesn't go into the office. She takes her kids to school in the morning, and she has a spacer just to like regroup with herself. And then it's this creative space for her that she doesn't have to be on the computer researching things and, taking meetings. It's just space for her to be in that creative time. And that's the spacer for her. So you can also even have like a spacer that's on like the downshifting spacer. Like on Thursday nights, I have what's called downshifting divine night on Thursdays. And at 7:00, I turn off all the work and everything that's going on. And I just do whatever is going to fill me up in my spirit. So Wednesdays is about space and a breath and creativity and not just having to be ... Thursday evenings are about what's going to fill up your spirit. What's going to fill up your spirit? And it only has to be a couple hours, but notice how it's like, wow, okay, so what Christine is saying, if I have that, that Monday, like up level, that's going to support me emotionally because you're not just going to be shocked into what has to happen. It's going to give you that ramp up. That break in the spacer in a Wednesday, it's going to give you a breath. What's going to fill you up. It's going to give you a mental break. It's going to help you have some physical, like, exhaling. And then Thursday's all about your spirit. And like just doing what fills up your spirit. And one woman I was talking with, it's just like she just needs to get out of her house, away from her kids, who she loves very much, and just go do something she wants to do. That's the spirit, right? And then having space as you go into Friday and Saturday, how are you mentally resetting? So it's not just like, oh, okay, now I'm not working for my job, but I have to get everything else done. You need a mental reset on the weekends where you're not thinking about anything significant or having to manage everything. For some people, that's going to the farmer's market. It's like, this is about putting these rituals in and just noticing your own energy output. One of the things that I do when I'm working with people is in mentoring, doing the Align Your Design transformational mentoring, is I work with a couple different systems that I feel like there's 4 different systems that I work with to help people get clear on their design that I just feel like are the best systems at what they do. And human design and Ayurveda are the best at understanding. And I think traditional Chinese medicine is up there too. Those are the systems that are really the best at understanding what supports your rhythm based on how your energy system works and how and what you need. So if you're not familiar with those systems, you should definitely, my invitation would be to check those out. But also just to start to get curious about, how does my energy, how does my energy work? And, so for me in human design, I'm a manifesting generator. So I'll just give, work, make like that. If I don't give myself a spacer on a Wednesday morning, I'll be burned out by Friday. Noah is a generator in human design, and he will give to everything else too. So he makes sure he goes to Tai Chi at 5:00 on Monday and 5:00 on Thursday. And those are set for his rhythm. So he has that space. He can just get out of the computer and be in that body, mind, heart, spirit place. So just thinking about this, it's like, not like, oh, I have to go work out. It's like, no, think about this as your well-being. And that work then has to move around it instead of you having to move around work. So just take that in for a second. Work has to move around this versus the other way. And I'm not saying there's not going to be resistance in the system, but what would be a rhythm shift that you could make immediately? And what's something that is not working for your design that's going to take a little bit longer to shift? So what's a shift you could make that would bring you more into alignment with your design of your well-being, body, mind, heart, and spirit, for the rhythm that best suits you weekly and the energy output that that works best for you? Maybe for you, it's like, I can give a lot of energy on Monday and Tuesday, but then I really do need Wednesday to be a pullback and work creatively. So just really starting to look at that. And maybe you don't know the answer. Like, you just need to go into your life and kind of look at it. But you'll notice what drains you. Notice when that energy tank starts to go down. And what we're looking for is that more consistent rhythm that gives you the space to give and receive and give and receive. So what I'm asking you for is what a shift you can make right now. Like, I had to take back my Wednesday mornings because I had given them away to work. And I took them back a couple weeks ago. And then this Wednesday I woke up and I was in a bad mood on Tuesday night. And I woke up Wednesday morning. I'm like, you know what? I almost gave it away again. Like, no, I'm going to take this space for myself. I'm going to water my plants. I'm going to go play with my garden. And then when the energy comes back up, I'm going to create. So start to play with that. That's going to take us into our second one, which is roll. Okay? These are like so little. It's like rhythm. Why is Christine always talking about the rhythm? Because it seems so simple. I know you all, but it's where the power is. And for those of you that have overwhelmed and over it, do the daily active liberation on resetting your weekly rhythm. That will give you a visual and all the things on how to make that really practical and start to work with it. And then I would love to hear what works for this. As we're doing this, one of the things I often ask is for people to leave reviews. And we haven't had any for a while. So I'm going to ask that again as things are popping up for you. I would really appreciate a review on the podcast, which you can do if you go to the show itself and you, not the episode, but the show, and you scroll down and it says rate or leave a review. And having your words there just means a ton. It makes me know what's working for you, and it helps other people, for whatever reason, find us. And if that's not your jam, sharing this podcast with another person it's how the feminine works. And many of you know that I am not a big social media person. I'm not going to go into all of the reasons why today, but it just feels like a vaporous energy suck. And so I post little things, show up there, but I don't put a lot of energy there because I want to put my energy in places where it can actually have an impact and not just be like this little thing that kind of wisps away, which is why I give so much energy to this podcast. And so one of the things I'm relying on is the superpower of connection and trusting that all of you who are here and show up, that you'll share this with others. And so that really helps me. It helps the work. And then I don't have to go on social media, which doesn't work for me. It just is such an energy drain. It's not how I work best. And this is part of the design, because people are like, well, Christine, you're an author. Christine, you're a public figure, you have to do these things. And I'm like, you know what? No, I do not have to do what is not in my design, because then I'm not going to be my most radiant self. I'm not going to be, my well-being is then in jeopardy. And then if I'm not in my well-being, then how am I going to be the most radiant person I can be? And so then I have to, feel into then what is in my design. I love doing this podcast. I feel like you and I are here. You have your, tea or water or coffee or vino. I have my coffee, and we're talking. It's like we're all together all around the world right now. And we're having meaningful dialogue and exploration, and we're opening things up. Just like I can feel the top of my head opening up and my heart opening up as we're using this tool of conversating. And we can't necessarily be one-on-one conversation. Although if we want to do a consultation or you want to work together like that, that's part of that. I can't do that with thousands of people. But to me, we're as connected as if we were right next to each other right now. And then you can look around to your left and your right and around. You're like, oh my God, there's so many other people here who are willing to be like today in this conversation about like, this is in my design and this isn't. And I understand that the banana world, the overculture, the business world, the success world, whatever it is, says that you have to do this. But what if that's not really true? What if you're one of the people on the planet to really activate your harmonic defiance? Harmonic defiance is all about liberating our power, which is the power. This is in the last chapter of Overwhelmed and Over It. I don't have the definition open, but basically what it is, it's your choice to do what's in harmony for you. Choosing the harmonic path for yourself, for others, to stay in alignment with your design. Not ranting about it, not raging about it, not have to post on social media about it or even tell anybody about it. You just do it. And then people are like, you can do that? And you're like, yeah, because people don't even think that. And then through your own choices and your voice, that's how things change. When I was 24 and I worked in consulting, I left we worked 65 to 70 hours, so don't get me wrong. It was a lot of work and not super healthy in that way. But every Friday I left at 5:00. And every year I took my birthday off. And people were like, where's she going? It's 5:00 and Friday. I'm like, see y'all later. See you on Monday. And, it didn't matter what was going on. I don't work on my birthday. And people were like, you could do that? You could do that? I mean, it's a very little example, but yeah, we can do that. So why we're having this conversation, love, is because I'm asking you to pause in your life and really get clear about what your design is. And you'll feel it when it's off, and you'll feel it in your body. You'll feel it emotionally. You'll feel it mentally and you'll feel it in your spirit. You'll tell yourself. But are you listening? And are you being honest with yourself? That's the first step of self-love. I forgot to answer the question I posed earlier of like, what is the first step of self-love? It's like you got to know yourself, self-awareness, and self-honesty, and be honest with yourself. And then because so many of us are here on the planet right now to do things differently, to be proof positive that you can not just survive, but thrive by staying true to your design, that you're going to come up to things that seem like the opposite of what society is reflecting back to you. And for some people, it's like things that aren't in your design might be in their design, because that's their dharma, that's their gifts, or in this case, that's how they work best. But we're not talking about everybody else here, we're talking about you. And what your design is today has always been your design, but we change and we evolve. And so as you feel into this rhythm, and we're going to go into roles next, and then your values and radiance and what really matters to you. And then even if you're like afraid, like I'm like, well, what if I just, if I'm not putting all this energy over in social media and I don't have all these followers, and, I've always said, like, I didn't come here to create followers. This whole follower business thing just makes me, as a teacher, I'm like, I don't want followers. I want to help people activate their leadership and then follow themselves, follow their higher guidance. I want to be connected to you all. I want to be in this journey with you all, but I don't want you to follow me. I want you to walk with me and co-create with me and be in this together. These are very subtle words, but it's interesting if you feel into the energy of it and you watch it. It's like, wow. And there are people who it's totally their design. And if it's like, it's your design, I love it, then great, because that means it is your design. And this is the great thing about aligning to our design. We don't have to make anybody else wrong. And we can stop comparing ourselves. We can stop comparing ourselves and just get like, wow, this is how I work. And then what will happen is we'll create work environments. We'll create value systems that allow people to work in their design. There's something called work style bias that is 100% present, that I don't think we give enough attention to, and is also a part of my work to help people see their own work style bias within themselves, and then how they impose that on their teams or their businesses or their kids, and actually, instead of imposing it, get curious about the different designs. So let's talk about that. I'm going to have to take a pause. That was good, wasn't it? That's the feminine. She likes to show up, you all. Okay, let me take a sip. So role. All right. So here, this is like your design for, again, putting well-being at the center of your work. Is different people are designed for different types of roles. So I'm just going to name these 4 different kinds for you to kind of consider. And you almost like you can rank them. And so one role is employee. And this is where you work for somebody else and they give you a paycheck, and it's structured. Like, this is your schedule. This is what's expected of you. These are your hours. And not that you necessarily stick with them, but, you give your energy and you're expected to show up and do what is required and asked of you. And some are more flexible, some are less flexible, but it is the role of employee. You get a paycheck and usually, hopefully, benefits with that. That's number 1. Number 2 is the entrepreneur. You are not getting a paycheck necessarily sustained by a company, although you might create a company. Entrepreneurs, for people whose role it is to be an entrepreneur, you're creating things that don't exist. You're creating systems. You're creating, there's some kind of system, whether it's a company or it's a methodology or it's like something that people can engage in. Is a little bit like being a pioneer. And so you have that in your design. If you're an entrepreneur, you have a high tolerance for risk. You have the ability to create things out of nothing. And usually a lot of times people who are entrepreneurs, you can be an intrapreneur. So that is more like an employee where you might have an entrepreneur spirit, but your design is, I need to have that consistent paycheck type of thing. And actually, I'm going to talk a little bit about the fourth one is a little bit more like intrapreneur. So number 3 is solo consultant or solo contributor, solo craftsperson, or solo caregiver. So I'm naming these different roles like consultant, contributor, craftsperson, caregiver, because remember, we are redefining work as not just what I do for my job that I get paid money for. You can have multiple parts of how this shows up for you. That's why, you might have a job that's more like an employee, but for some of us, it's the solo consultant or solo contributor, solo craftsperson, or solo caregiver. And you're like your own little private Idaho, your own person, and you go in and out of different systems in order to give your gifts in the world and receive from that. So like a solo craftsperson, let me give you the fourth one. The fourth one is collaborative. So you have employee and entrepreneur. That's kind of the two that are together. Are you more of an employee? Does that like really work for you, or more of an entrepreneur? And then this other one part of role, is it more like the solo, like consultant, caregiver, contributor, craftsperson person, or are you more collaborative? So it's solo versus collaborative. So an example is like where I go to pottery at. The pottery studio I go to is like full of all these people who come in and do residences, and the residences actually do teaching, and it's very communally based. So they are very much collaborative craftspeople. But there are other people, other potters who have their own studio, and they're very much solo craftspeople. They're not in a communal environment. People come in just for their art and leave just for their art. But like where I go, Odyssey Clayworks, it's all full of like all these different potters are showcasing their things. So it's a very collaborative way. When I, as a consultant, I work best as a collaborative consultant versus just a solo consultant. So instead of like, a solo consultant or a solo contributor, you might just be like a person who's an engineer and, will contract and work for a company. They go in, they do the job, and you come out. And it's not so much about being in the collaborative energy. It's more about being awesome at your craft, going in and contributing and coming out. For others of us, like me, I'm much more of a collaborative consultant. So when I was in my 20s, I worked in an agency, a marketing agency, and I worked on a team called the STAT team. And that team's every 6 months, we got a new assignment. So it really fed my entrepreneurial spirit, but I was within this kind of collaborative consultancy. And I've always worked best as a consultant. I was not a good fit for me to be an employee, because like having to follow the rules and show up at certain times and, it just didn't work. And we'll get into that a little bit next. And like what doesn't work for us, or what Noah calls role chafing. It's like there's things that, as I'm sharing some of these, like you'll notice the roles that fit because they feel like you can really expand in them and you can dance in them. And even if you're working a lot, they support your mind, body, heart, and spirit because they're aligned to your design. You think of one of Noah's relatives. He's an employee and he has the same job he's had for 15, 16, 17 years. And he likes that. He goes in and he knows his schedule and his daily schedule, his weekly schedule, his yearly schedule. And then he has the summer off from that, and he does other things. And that works really well for him because he is an employee and part of this organization, but then he can be more in his entrepreneurial spirit over the summer. So not all of these have to also just be one thing. Right. And I don't want to have anyone go and be like, oh my God, I have to be an employee and I have to go create 7 side hustles because the time of the hustle. is over. However, that doesn't mean that you might not have a craftsperson inside of you that is like a collaborative consultant. So my pottery teacher, she's a graphic designer. She goes in as a solo consultant and she does design work for companies. And she's also a collaborative collaborative craftsperson. So she goes in as an individual contributor to do design work for people. They pay her money. And then she also does pottery and teaches pottery inside the collaborative craftsperson. And then for those of you who are caregivers, this is also an important part because caregiving is part of our work in the world. And there's a big stand that I take is that we need to value this and say it is work. But looking at this again, are you best, if you're a caregiver in any way, shape, or form, do you do that best as a solo caregiver? Or do you do that best as a collaborative caregiver? So I'm thinking of some people I know that go in and do in-home nursing, and they go in and they do the nursing, and that's what they do. So it has that solo contributor. I go in, I come out. I go in, I come out. And then I know other people who are caring for a child or a parent, and it's the collaborative caregiving that works for them. They've tried the solo caregiving, and it exhausted them because they were taking way too much on or just splitting it with a sister or something else. But when they moved into the collaborative caregiving model, it opened up to create a spectrum of care. So more caregivers could come in different ways that then cared for this being as a whole. I'm getting total body chills now thinking about this. And it's a mind shift, of solo, collaborative. Both are okay, but what I want to know is what's your best design now? Employee, entrepreneur, solo, collaborative. Employee, entrepreneur, solo, collaborative. Kind of looking at those four different things. And that's where, I'm saying, and expanding to contributor, consultant, craftsperson, caregiver. Just take a minute and just notice what hasn't worked for you in the past. It's chafed you. It's felt constrictive to you. It's felt, incoherent to you. And again, I just want you to be honest with yourself right now. Be honest with yourself and what's felt really coherent to you. Gosh, this is when, even for me as the consultant, the collaborative consultant, if I was working, I wouldn't do this again, but the 65 hours a week in my 20s, I wouldn't do it again because I was not in line with my values. I was basically, figuring out how to sell potato chips, but I loved working with the people and I learned so much. I felt free in it. So I know I work best as a collaborative consultant and entrepreneur. How about you? Name it, claim it, embrace it, and then start to play with what that looks like for you. One of the systems I love for this is evolutionary astrology. And really understanding your archetypes and how you work and how you're meant to interact within and with systems. And for those of you that aren't familiar with evolutionary astrology, check it out. It's one of the things I work with all my clients on, and I work with myself. It's a really powerful way to use astrology. And maybe I'll have my evolutionary astrologer come on later this year. We'll see. I'll see if she'll come on and do some podcast with us and talk about some of this. Okay, last one. I want to make sure that we wrap this up in a good way. So this last one's about radiance. So again, this is about putting your well-being in the center of your work, and then work works around it, not the other way. So radiance is very much tied to what in the coaching world they call your values, or in the work that I've done on self-love, in the path of self-love, what we call your heart and soul gold. So these are the things that are present for you. And they're not so much of a thing as more of an essence or an energy or a reality, that when these are present for you, this environment, these essences, these feelings, these kinds of experiences are present for you, it's like gold. It fills you up. You feel fulfilled. You feel radiant. Your radiance just is, because you're being nourished and nurtured at a body, mind, heart, and spirit level. And when this heart and soul gold or values is not present, you become dull and darker and diminished, and your radiance goes rah, 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 rah. So if you've ever had it to think of a time, so this is how you get into it. So basically, to align to your design, I feel like you need to know your top 4 values. And if you can't tell me what those top 4 values are right now, this is a good assignment for you. And I'm going to give you a little way to start to get into this. This is one of the tools we teach in the Self-Love Essentials. And it's also in the Madly in Love with Me book, but it's a great inquiry to be around, because then you can, it's like it tells you, it shows you, don't go that way. That's not aligned to my design. Oh yeah, that's very aligned to my design. So these are the 2 inquiries I'm going to give you, and then I'll give you an example, and then we'll wrap you up in a bow here. So think of a job that you've had, part of your career, in which it felt very aligned, and your heart and soul just felt very good. Like it just felt aligned and coherent. And even if you might have been working a lot, or maybe you weren't, paid as much as you would have liked to have been, you can look back on that and really see yourself thriving in that time. You might not take that job today, but you can look back and you can see, wow, like that really at that time really worked for me, and I felt good and I felt fulfilled, even if it was, even if there were some things that were not great about it. Generally, the energy of it felt very aligned. And see if you can look at that and ask yourself, what was true about that role, that environment, that job that allowed you to express or receive what you needed and what really supported your desires and your design? What was present for you there that you can look back on now and be like, wow, I could really see how the presence of this, or this quality of this design really matched my design. And then you want to flip it and say the same thing about the opposite. Like, what was a job, a role that you had that was not in alignment with your design? It was a struggle. Maybe you felt like you weren't seen. Maybe it created distress, and like the kind of stress that was body, mind, heart, and spirit, not just hours stress or work stress, but there's like a way that the environment and the job itself did not match your design. And my whole body is just sinking. It was not supporting your radiance. Like, you might have tried to be radiant, but then it was like down again. You'd be like, I'm going to be radiant, down again. It's almost like it dampens that radiance. It diminishes that radiance. And what was true about that environment and the expectations or the energy or the working ethos there? I'm thinking for myself of a job I had when I was getting my MBA. The value of it, it paid 80% of getting my MBA at Kellogg, and I also was going through pretty much a big, huge personal awakening and a divorce. So I needed that kind of a job, but that job was such a mismatch for me on a radiance level, because they wanted to be mediocre. They did not want the consultant. They did not want to make things better. People just wanted to go in and do their job and leave. And it was just so heavy. And I wasn't there for the job. I was there. I met 2 great people. They supported me financially and emotionally. It was not the time for me to be giving a bunch of energy to a job around excellence. But one of my values is transformation and evolution and growing. Like if I'm not growing and transforming and evolving, like I'm just like, like a bird who's like just wet and sopped with oil. And so while I was transforming in my own personal life, that place was not right for me professionally. So when I finished grad school, as soon as I finished, I quit and moved to the West Coast. So I know that about myself, right? I know that about myself. And I also know variety was really present in every job I've ever loved, which is why I love doing consultancy. I'm great with working for things for a short period of time. And then I want to continue to have variety in what I do. So everyone's is different here. But if you could just choose like one thing, like that totally is like, that's present. If this isn't present, no matter how much money they give me, my radiance is going to be in the toilet, not in my design. And what's one thing like when this is present, even if it's challenging, even if maybe it's not as much money, it makes me come alive. And start there. Name those. And remember, the question is, imagine what would happen, imagine what would be possible if you put your well-being in the center of your work, and that work had to come around that. What are the shifts you could start to make to align to your design in small ways now? And what are some of the bigger ones that are coming in this next phase? And that will help you see what are those bigger shifts you want to make. So like for me, the fact that I don't love to play the see me game and always having to put myself out there and send out communications and all of that does mean that I've been making a shift in my business model and what I'm focusing on. And that's okay. I've done this multiple times in my life. And if you're continuing to evolve and elevate, love, you're going to do that too. So if you take a step back and you say, okay, like to be able to be quote unquote successful in this system, these are the things I can influence. These I can't influence. Maybe there's a different system. Maybe there's a different way for me to design my work so that it actually aligns with my well-being going forward. That is what we're looking for. So take a breath, experiment, explore, and elevate. And I will see you very soon. Much love, everyone.
Welcome back, wise beings. Okay. Rhythm, role, and radiance. Such powerful realms to explore as we get to know ourselves and our design more deeply. And I love so many threads in this episode, but I'm going to share with you one key piece that has transformed my reality. And then I'll share with you a bit about where we're going with this podcast in the next season. Okay, so the key piece of this exploration that's truly transformed my days and therefore my weeks and my months and my years is an understanding of my energetic design. Understanding that I may have my own unique energetic composition and field, and that it's actually affected by the energies around me, be that energies coming from other people, the environment, etc. And this has helped me to understand the importance of protecting my energetic field and protecting my energy through the way that I structure my week so that I'm not just taking in others' energy willy-nilly. As Christine mentioned, there are many modalities and wisdom traditions through which you can learn more about your unique design. And some of the ones that have helped me the most are human design, the gene keys, astrology, and Ayurveda. And what I've learned about my own design is how empathic, highly sensitive, and open to taking on others' energy I am. So it's very important for me. And I would actually say it's important for all of us to intentionally design my days and weeks with the energetic fields that I'm playing in mind. Now, I didn't know about any of this when I first began my work and my career, and I burned out so many times. Whether it was being in the environment of working on a hedge fund trading floor, which is where I started my career right out of undergrad. I was with lots of people, no partitions, phones ringing constantly, multiple televisions hanging from the ceiling, broadcasting the 24-hour market news, and there were so many of us packed onto that floor that if you rolled your chair back at the same time as the person sitting in the desk behind you, you'd crash into each other. So you can imagine, it was intense. And, there were a lot of invigorating, positive things about it, but From an energetic perspective, it was sort of like swimming in a hurricane every day. And then later, at the same company, I had advanced to sharing a tiny office with just 4 other people who were all under intense amounts of stress and high expectations. So that was another, bit of a high intensity energetic situation. And then after I got my MBA, I shifted my rhythm to one in which I would arrive at O'Hare Airport at 4:30 a.m. every Monday to fly to a client site and work 12-hour days packed into a conference room with a team of fellow high achiever management consultants. Again, a lot of energy in a really small space for a really long amount of time. Now, that was 15 to 20 years ago. And the work world has changed a lot, right? Especially since, as Christine calls it, the great wake up and shake up of the pandemic. And yet, with the expansion of remote work models and flexible work models, there's a new challenge that we're seeing, the challenge of the always on model. That external has shifted. We're not all packed into offices anymore. And I'm sure each and every one of you listening here has noticed some sort of a shift in your own work life. But even as the external shifted, if the internal consciousness stayed the same, then unless we've done the work and exploration to shift on the inside, we're just going to recreate the unsustainable rhythms, regardless of what the outside looks like. So, what that looks like for so many of us now is the always on model, right? We may have flexibility in terms of location, but are we truly at choice in terms of how we're creating the rhythms of our days and our weeks? And, I unconsciously did this to myself as well when I left the corporate world and became an entrepreneur, supposedly for the freedom. Yet I fell into unsustainable rhythms because that's what was imprinted into me. I didn't have the wisdom to explore my design or my aligned rhythm until later. And once I did, it has shifted everything. So I encourage and invite you to explore this for yourself. What is your unique design? And what shifts could you make to bring your work more into alignment with your design and well being? All right, so that's the inquiry for today. And now I'd love to share a little preview of where we're going next at Feminine Power Time. So, this episode marks the completion of season 8.5, the season of light. And it's been a tremendous pleasure and honor to be here holding space with all of you during this season. And so, speaking of seasons, Christine and I want to be transparent with you all about what lies ahead in the next season. And the truth is, there's what we know and what's still in the mystery, like always, right? And what we know is that here at Feminine Power Time, we follow cyclical living and the natural cycle. And in traditional Chinese medicine and Ayurveda, there are actually 5 seasons in a year, not 4. So we're currently in the 5th season, a season called in the Northern Hemisphere late summer. It runs from mid-August to the autumn equinox, which is mid-September, 3rd week of September, really. And this season is all about grounding, nurturing, reflection, and it's rooted in the earth element. So in the Northern Hemisphere, it's this transition time between summer and autumn. In the Southern Hemisphere, it's the transition between winter and spring. And at Feminine Power Time, we're going to be honoring this shift as well by taking a pause for the next 3 weeks of late summer in the Northern Hemisphere. And Christine will be back at September equinox around the 3rd week of September. So this season that we're in, like all seasons, will pass. So the question is, how do you want to use it? Christine's taking the next 3 weeks to do a full cleanse for 9 days to get clear and centered, among other things. And this is so aligned because this is a time of dissolving from one rhythm into the next. And so, what if you took this pause to allow yourself to explore ways to center your life and your work around well being, body, mind, heart, and spirit? This is the perfect inquiry for this naturally shifting time where we can allow the structures and rhythms to start to shift and then to find their natural rhythms by equinox. So it doesn't happen overnight, it's a gradual shift. And just to notice what's being catalyzed and to give yourself the space to do this. And we don't fall behind here, but if you missed any Season of Light episodes, this is a great time to go back and listen or listen again, or to listen to the other episodes from the Align to Your Design series, which is what today's episode came from. And we'll put the names of these series and the episode numbers in the show notes for you so that you can find them very easily. So until next time, your invitation is to explore the inquiry. What shift could you make to bring your work more into alignment with your design and well-being? And then share this podcast with a friend and invite them to conversate on this inquiry with you. We'll also be posting the inquiry up in the Feminine Wisdom Cafe over the next week, so you can drop in there and connect and share what's coming up for you around your unique design and what shifts you could make to support aligning your work with your well-being. Christine and I are there too, and we would be so delighted to connect with you and witness your journey. And then join us at September equinox as we move into the next season together. Looking forward to being with you again. Sending you all off with much love.